Welcome back to what promises to be another insightful and inspirational Friday Feature Artist interview. Today, we have the privilege of diving into the mind and studio of one of the most innovative and inspiring artists in the fibre arts world today, Jo Stealey. Jo Stealey has charted a remarkable path through the intersections of nature, traditional craft, and contemporary art. Her journey began rooted in a deep fascination with the natural world and an inherent desire to blend this with her domestic environment, creating pieces that not only stand as art, but as bridges connecting the viewer to the tactile and ephemeral experiences of life. Jo's sculptures, books, and collages are not just seen but experienced, urging a deep connection with the art and ultimately with ourselves. An award-winning artist, educator, lecturer and curator with work featured in exhibitions around the globe and in prestigious collections such as the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, Jo has left an indelible mark on the art world, both nationally and internationally. With 37 years of teaching experience and as the former director of the University of Missouri's School of Visual Studies, Jo has shaped the future of countless artists, infusing her passion for the fibre arts into the next generation. Tonight, we delve into Jo's artistic process, exploring how daily walks in nature inspire her, the intricate techniques behind her papermaking and basketry, and the conceptual depth of her series. From creating large-scale installations that transform spaces into otherworldly landscapes to intimate artist books capturing personal narratives, Jo's work invites us to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. So, as we spend the next hour with Jo Stealey, expect to be inspired, to question, and to see the world through the lens of an artist who truly believes in the poetry of the visual. If you're joining in live, please leave a comment letting us know where you are in the world and feel free to ask a question and engage in the conversation. If you're catching up on a replay, thanks for joining us and we hope you enjoy the conversation. So, without further ado, let's welcome Jo Stealey as our 123rd Friday Feature Artist. Hello, Jo.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a real honor and I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome. Well, it's Friday morning for me and it's Thursday afternoon for you. So, yeah, I'm very, very thrilled to have you here today. And we've also got people all around the world watching. So thanks everyone for joining in. I'm going to shout out a few people. So, hi, Sharon. Lovely. Hi, Margaret. Oh, from Canada. Beautiful. Hi, Julianne from New South Wales. We've got Tracy, Elizabeth, Anne. Hello. Jenny. Hi, Jenny. Susan. So lots of familiar names for me. Hopefully some familiar names for you too, Jo.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Isn't that great?
Great. So nice to see everyone.
It is so great. Jo, you began your artistic pursuits in both ceramics and weaving. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us the moment that shifted the balance towards fibre arts and how the journey has evolved since then?
Sure. I think I've always had an interest in textiles because I grew up with a family of women who were seamstresses, tailors, needleworkers. And so when I went to college and studied weaving as well as ceramics, I felt like I found my home in terms of what I wanted to be making in my life. And then in the early 1980s, I took a papermaking workshop and then a basketry workshop. And I found that I could begin to incorporate everything that I loved about clay and vessel making and everything that I loved about textiles and weaving in a body of work where I used both of those processes. And I've been on that journey ever since.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Throughout, our career here at Fibre Arts Take Two, there seems to be such a synergy between sort of clay basket making and fibre, and that just the vessel form. It is such a beautiful form, symbolic as well. So
yeah, I think it's ubiquitous to all cultures, and every culture has a ceramic tradition. Every culture has a basket making tradition, and they've gone hand in hand. And archaeologists have even identified that the earliest clay forms had basketry textures embedded in them, and so obviously they were used together. And we still love them today. They're still ubiquitous for us today. Sometimes they're made out of plastic rather than reed or other natural materials, and we still eat off of clay plates, most of us. So it's still part of our lives.
Yeah, I love that. I love that clay comes to, these materials come directly from the earth, connects us back to
Absolutely.
who we are, what we are. Yeah.
Mhm.
You spent your childhood growing up in a farm near St. Louis, close to the Missouri River, which, it just sounds idyllic, just beautiful. What do we need to understand about your upbringing to understand the artist that you are today?
Well, I think that yes, it was a very idyllic upbringing, because I grew up on this farm where I was free to roam over fields and into the woods and gather rocks in the creek bed and really explore nature. But at the same time, my family would go into St. Louis on weekends, and we would go to museums, we would go to concerts. And so I had the best of both worlds. I had advantages that I didn't realize were advantages as a child that have really informed who I am as an adult. And I think that those patterns and the love of both nature and the cultural manifestations of what we as people make have just stayed with me all of my life. And I have continued to live in a rural environment the majority of my life. I just moved into Columbia, Missouri, the town where I am now, a couple of years ago. And this is the first time in many, many years that I have lived in an urban community. And while that's wonderful, I still find myself driving out to the country on a daily basis to take my hikes, and so it's just part and parcel of who I am, having both of those experiences.
Yeah. How lucky to grow up in a creative family. Joe and I were talking offline about how your art practice kind of spreads out throughout the house. And I was explaining that the other day we couldn't actually find a place for our plates at the dining room table because it was covered in art materials.
Happens in my household all the time.
Exactly. And I just had to take a breath and go, you know what? I could get a little annoyed that we don't have a place to sit in. But I was thinking back to the conversations that Joe and I had during our test call. And it was like, no, this is part of having a creative life. And what am I setting up my kids for here? So, exactly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be clean.
Yeah. And that's why we have TV trays, so that we can create a table space when we need one.
Exactly. You've just come back from a month-long residency at Penland School of Craft, and that's in North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains. It sounds idyllic and it looks idyllic. I encourage everybody to jump onto the Penland School of Arts website, and I'll pop a link up in a minute. But tell me, Joe, what did you discover about yourself and your art practice during this time, like having a whole month to dedicate just to being in one place with your art?
This is the first time that I've had the opportunity to have a full month away from what I would guess would be called my normal everyday life, where you have lots of commitments to family, friends, and professional commitments as well. And I wasn't sure how that would be for me, but I knew that I wanted to have an opportunity to have a retreat from my everyday, to just see what would happen and develop a new body of work. I'm getting a lot of echo as my
Well, just if you turn your volume down slightly.
Let me just turn it down a little bit. Is that okay now? And so it was surprising to me in some ways and not surprising at all in other ways, the experience, because I would get up at between 5 and 5:30 every morning and not even make coffee in the house where I was staying. I would just go over to the studio and make my coffee and be able to sit in the studio and contemplate what I was going to be doing for the day, start working in the studio. I had 12 hours a day where I was just working and exploring. And my intention was not to come away with a body of work necessarily, but to have the beginnings of a new body of work that extends what I have been doing in new and unexpected ways. And that actually did happen for me. I came home with all of these elements that I'm now starting to put together. In fact,
Give us a look.
Angela's. I was sitting here working on this when I got onto the talk today, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, this is a piece that is going to go inside of this piece here, and this piece is going to go on top of it. It's not the color it's going to be yet, but it's this is what I'm doing now. I'm taking all of these elements. I discovered new ways of casting things, new ways of dealing with the handmade paper, and." Penland is an idyllic situation. We're in the mountains. You're completely surrounded by nature. I did not have distractions other than having really fun people new people that I got to meet and become friends with. And, this lovely environment. And I really advocate finding a time that you can give yourself an opportunity to have a retreat, even if it's just a week or a few days. It's really lovely to be able to step back from what you do on a daily basis and center yourself, center your practice. And that's what happened for me. And I can't thank Penland enough for that.
That's beautiful. And you certainly deserve it, Jo. You've been teaching,
Yes.
taught for 37 years. Now, that's a long time, so kudos to you.
Kind of reveals how old I am too, doesn't it?
Experience. Oh, it's a beautiful, it's amazing.
I love teaching. I really do teach.
Yeah. And they say that to teach is to learn. So
Yes.
I've got a couple of questions around teaching. Okay. So one, how did you fit in your own creative practice when you were teaching and as the director of a visual arts school? And then also, how did teaching impact that your studio art practice? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as a young faculty member, I was charged with developing a national reputation. That was part of the job that I had. I was at a Research One institution at the University of Missouri. And so having that as a demand was, I loved, because it meant that I didn't have an excuse to not be in the studio if I wanted to keep this position. I had to work and I had to exhibit the work. And so early in my career, I was able to develop a studio practice where I was teaching 2 days a week. And then I would have 2 days a week where I would be in the studio from early morning until noon or 2 o'clock. And then I would go in and do meetings and things at the university. And then, of course, I had weekends that I would mix with family and having some practice. And fortunately, I've always been able to have some kind of handwork that I'm doing in addition to the paper making and the larger, really physical elements in the work. And so when I would be sitting around talking with family members or watching TV or doing whatever we're doing, I would be doing my handwork. I would be making my baskets, doing my stitching. and that really served me well as I went into an administrative position and had less time to be in my studio. And it actually initiated a series where I gave myself an assignment, which is often what I do. I give myself some parameters in which to work. And I selected an elongated form, and I wanted to kind of a pod form. And you'll see some of the pieces that have grown out of that series. And I wanted to explore making as many of those forms out of different materials and techniques that I could come up with, thinking that, oh, this is just an exercise that doesn't require a lot of my time. I can come in and work on a piece, and if I don't get back to it for a couple of days, it's okay. Well, that evolved to be about 25 pieces that became a piece unto itself called Refuge. And I don't think you have that image.
No, I was just looking and I don't think I do, but I've seen it on, I think I've seen it on your Instagram. It was up against a wall, like it was lots of pods on a wall.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's on my website as well. And so in the last couple of years that I was working as an administrator, that I was working on that series because I felt like it was really important, even though I couldn't devote the same amount of time to my studio practice that I had been, I wanted to keep making. And that gave me the opportunity to make. And that, I know we're going to talk about advice for other artists at some point in this conversation, but that is something I think is really crucial, is to figure out how to carve that little piece of time, even if it's 30 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day. And all you're doing is looking at your sketchbook, or you're looking at a piece in process and making notes about it. And that's the other thing that I found was really helpful for me. Whenever I would quit working for the day, I would make notes about where I was and what I was thinking about and what I intend to do next, so that when I come back into the studio, then I can immediately start working again and not have to try to think about, okay, well, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
Yeah.
That kind of got off of your question a little bit.
I love that. I love it when that happens, Jo. And we're going to show like a lot of images of your work shortly, but I just wanted to touch on that advice for people watching, like just carving out that 30 minutes a day. And or even if it's 30 minutes feels unrealistic, just 10 minutes, because often what happens is 10 minutes turns into 30 before you know it.
And that's the other thing. I always keep a little pocket-sized notebook with me, because I never know when I'm going to see something and have an idea that I want to pursue. And I may just write a little note in it, or I may do a quick little sketch and then come back later. Those are really helpful things, that when you don't have time to sit down and really think through what you're wanting to do, you've got these little kind of cheat sheets, little notes that you can take with you, and then you open the notebook up when you're ready to sit down and think about what you're doing next. And all of a sudden, all that information is coming right back to you, so that you can get going quickly.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people can feel quite intimidated about the notion of a sketchbook, and you know, it is just as simple as what you said, just writing down a few little words, and that will take you directly back to where you were. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece in these sketchbooks.
No, drawing is not where I focus my work. I use my drawing only to get my ideas down. I do more drawing now than I used to, but there was a long time when I was so intimidated by drawing. I would do like these stick figure drawings just to get the idea down, with lots and lots of writing. So if some of our audience don't feel comfortable drawing, don't let that stop you. You just need to get that information down, because then it's out of your head. You can let it go and not have to think about it until you have time to think about it again.
Yeah, exactly. Great advice, Jo. How is your work like making a new friend? You wrote in one of your emails, and I was like, I have to ask you that question.
So why don't you pull up one of the the vessels that are in the boxes, like Duality or House of Pict or one of those other pieces,
Yeah, sure.
because this started for me earlier in my career when I um, began making these vessels and contextualizing them within a house kind of structure.
Mm.
And this particular one was one of the earlier ones. It's called Duality, and it's got the words yin and yang embedded into the vessels. Yin is the top vessel, and yang is the bottom vessel. And these are permanently installed in the piece. But then when you go to the next piece, Angela, Duality, and you'll see, and I'm sorry, not Duality, House of Pict. Um, the vessels will actually come out of the structure, and I began thinking about these vessels as something that were very tactile. The paper itself, the way the vessels are made, the details that are in the vessels are they they're begging you to touch them.
Mm.
And so I actually began to think about that as why can't we deny what galleries have told us all of this time that you shouldn't be touching work? Why don't you make work that can be touched and make it sensual enough that people are longing to touch it? And then when you do, when you pick the object up, there's something behind there that reveals more of the story. And that's where I first started thinking about the work as creating a friend. And as you get to know the work better, more it's a deeper relationship, just like as you and I get to know each other, we are parts of our lives are being revealed, and the friendship becomes deeper and more intimate. And the same thing happens with a piece of artwork. The longer you look at it, the more that you're involved with it, the deeper the relationship was. I have this great rug that's on the floor behind me, that has all of these animals and figures in it. And I've had this rug for probably 15, 20 years now. And still, every once in a while, I'll look at the rug and I'll think, I've not seen that animal before, or I didn't realize that there was that change of color in the way that the weaver wove that rug.
Yeah.
Um, that's the kind of relationship that I'm talking about with objects. That we develop this connection to them. Many of the objects that we have in our lives are the result of experiences that we've had, places that we've traveled, people that we've met, that we've connected with. The pieces on the wall behind you, the pieces that are on in my space here,
Mm.
are all part of that connection, and I love having that. And so I think of my work as a friend.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's beautiful. And I loved how I mean, you do, when you see this piece, you do want to pick these objects up. Is that something that you allow people to do in the exhibition, Joe, or is it strictly a no-no in galleries?
It depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
What I usually say to the gallerist is if there's someone who's really interested in the work and you want to pick it up so that they can see the work more intimately, please do. It's
Mm.
not, it's I don't let I don't think it's appropriate for people just to be able to come in and pick things up, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that can create problems for other
Yes.
art, the work of other artists, and I want to
Yeah.
respect that too. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Talk to us about your books. They're just beautiful, and they're like sculptures and just stunning. What's the significance of making books for you?
So, I think the books, well, one of the things that has happened when I was teaching in the fiber program at the university, I taught a lot of different media. I taught weaving, both on loom weaving as well as off loom weaving and basketry, surface design, dyeing, printing on textiles, paper making, book arts, and
Wow.
as I taught those different techniques over the years, they began to be integrated into my own working methodologies. And part of the book series was a result of wanting to take the vessels that were in the structures on the wall and work with them in a new way. And because I'm always interested in drawing the viewer in and slowly revealing what the ideas are in the work by interacting with the work. And a book is a natural structure to interact with. We know when we sit with a book and read that we're slowly turning those pages, and where the story is being revealed as we turn those pages. And so some of my books don't have a lot of pages. They're more visual. Some of the books do have pages, such as the ones that you are showing right now. And they usually talk about very personal things in my life. These two books that you're showing, one is, as I remember, was called Contained, and that was about a period of my life where I felt like I just could not break out of these boundaries that I was in, and so I just created this book that dealt with that, thinking, well, maybe that'll help me figure out how to break out of these. And then the other book that you're showing, and I don't remember the title of this one. Exposed, yes. And so once I broke out of being contained, then I felt really exposed and vulnerable. And so they visually deal with those psychological landscapes that I have in my own life that I think are probably relevant to many people. Whether a viewer is getting the same thing out of the work that I am putting into it, that's not important, but sometimes they do.
It's interesting that you say that, Jo, because we've had conversations recently with within our student communities about putting content within your work and themes, and that theme and content is very important to the artist, but not necessarily, it's not the be all and end all if the viewer doesn't get it. That's not your responsibility as an artist. It's
I agree. My responsibility is the making of the object and trying to be as poetic in the way that I'm expressing that idea as I can be. But I don't want to hit the viewer over the head so that it becomes a one-liner. And that's all it ever is. Because for me, if that's what's in the work, I look at it once and I say, oh, okay, I get it. I don't need to look at it again. I want something that is, it causes you to have that deeper relationship with the work, that you want to stay engaged with it and continue to experience it. And I do think of it as visual poetry. It's like reading an Emily Dickinson poem, or whatever poet is that you love, and you want to come back to that poem many times because it's speaking to you in a way that is important and soulful. And I want my work to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you were talking about, your artwork as being friends, and quite often, we feel the same way about a good book. They become our friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And we reread those books.
Yeah, over and over again. Yeah. Jo, I wanted to remind people too, we've got 100 odd people watching live. This is live, so please, if you have a question for Jo, pop it in the comments and we'll get to it. Absolutely. Moving on to your large installations, Jo. So I just love the depth and breadth to your work. You had an exhibition not so long ago, and it was called Extraordinary at the Wingate Art and Design Gallery at the University of, I'm not going to be able to say this properly, how do you say it?
University of Arkansas at Fort Smith.
Arkansas, is it?
Mhm.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
What was it like putting this exhibition together? And talk us through, there's one piece in particular, I mean, it was obviously center stage in the middle of the exhibition, and it was called Forest, this large installation. Talk us through this, and I'll pop a couple of images up.
Sure. So that exhibition took place, well, it was supposed to take place in 2020, but COVID hit. And so it was 2022 when the exhibition was mounted. And as we were mounting the show, they shut down the school again. So then the show was shut down for several weeks. After it was quite an experience. But the process of putting that together, when I was asked to do this show, I didn't want it to be just a retrospective, and you can see from some of the work that I do that it's my work is very time consuming. It's very detailed. So I wanted to incorporate some work that I had done before that corresponded with the work that I was doing that was new for the show. And the forest is a piece that I have been working on now for about 15 years.
Wow.
It has gone to, I believe it's gone to 9 different venues at this point. And every time it's shown, some pieces are added to it, some pieces are taken away. And I try to make it as site specific as possible so that the arrangement it really fits into the space. And the forest for me is about that life, death, life cycle. In the spring, plant life comes back. It starts to turn green and growth occurs. And in the summer, it matures. In the fall, it begins to die back. And in the winter, it appears dead. But out of that death, regeneration and rebirth occurs. And so I'm using the literal forest in nature as a metaphor for humanity and how I view my own human qualities that I am going to pass away physically at some point in time, but I'm also regenerating myself and remaking myself as I go through life. And so this piece plays with all of those ideas. And I would say that idea goes through, it's a thread that connects a lot of the work.
Yeah. And the large trees represented in forest, are they made out of paper?
The whole piece, the entire piece is made out of paper. And the large trees have a permanent armature that is made out of river willow, which is one of the materials that I gather and process. And then I create those structures by assembling them with a pneumatic nail gun and screws sometimes. And then they're covered with wet paper. I mostly work with 𝗝ecie and flax, and I beat them for anywhere from 8 to 12 hours in my beater, which creates this very high shrinkage fiber. And as it dries, it shrinks and becomes very skin-like. And I love that skin-like quality. That's why the material is so important in my work, because I'm talking about skin and different layers of skins, and skin is being very ethereal and ephemeral, but at the same time very tough and strong. And I think about that in we as humans, and the skin of the trees is doing that same thing.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. It's just beautiful. I love that. That concept that, the skin is almost like it is our largest organ in our body that we don't really, you know, a lot of people forget that. So, yeah. One of the common problems for emerging artists is how to take an idea and move it into finished artwork. What's your process, and what advice can you give someone who may be stuck moving an idea forward? And you may have some images that might help explain this as well.
Why don't you pull one of the pieces up from Tool Stories, and I'll talk about it through that series. I did 𝗝cie 𝗦𝘁𝗲𝗆𝗆, who is a well-known artist from Portland, Maine, and I are very good friends, and she and I did a show together at Craft Alliance in St. Louis in 2022, and we spent a lot of time talking about what we wanted to do. Both of us are very interested in objects. We have we laughingly talk about our twin muses, because we will often, when we see each other and see what each of us is working on and thinking about it, they're very similar. And so we decided that we were going to take tools as an inspiration, and primarily historical tools. And I hit upon brushes as one of the things that I really wanted to explore. And so I started thinking about brushes that clean, brushes that groom, brushes that paint and clean up messes, and created these sculptural forms that are reminiscent of a tool but are no longer tools. And they're very mixed media. They're made out of handmade paper, river willow, wax linen, horsehair, different processes. I would twine and coil and do knotless netting, and explore these objects without quite understanding how I was going to contextualize them. And I had my sketchbook with lots of sketches of exploring different things, and then I would, when I would get stuck, I call this the what if game, and I would just make a list. What if I tried this? What if I did this? What if I did that? And I would just make a list of as many things as I could think of, until I hit upon something that was like, oh yeah, that is, I haven't tried that before. That feels right. It seems like something that I should really try. And I would try it. And so the tools themselves took on this almost whimsical quality. And then I began to think about, okay, well, how am I going to display these so that they are meaningful? And I went back and played that game again. What if I try this? What if I try that? And that one particular piece with the shelf with the objects on top of it, Grandma's Closet. I've forgotten what the name of it is.
Yeah, Grandma's Closet. Yeah.
Yeah. I began to remember the utility closet in my grandmother's kitchen, and the things that she would have stored there, and how it was organized. And so that's how that shelf became part of this piece. And that's how those objects that are sitting on top of it came into being as well. So when I'm thinking about how to finish a piece, I'm thinking about formally, what do I need to do? And I go back to, elements and principles of art, line, shape, color, pattern, space. I think about those issues, but I also think about conceptually, what is it that I'm after, and how do I need to contextualize this in order to get that idea across as effectively as I can?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's certainly beautiful, and I love this. I love your tool series, and it was how I discovered your work. Actually, was through 𝗝cie 𝗦𝘁𝗆𝗆𝗆. She said you must talk to Jo, and I loved how you spoke about having a twin muse. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about that, and also what you love about collaboration? Because I think a lot of people might go, oh, like if they came across another person's artwork, say online or these days where everything's so visible and accessible, and they saw something that was super, super close to yours, they might think, hey, they're copying me. But you refer to it as in this scenario as a twin muse, and I love that. Talk to us about that.
I think Lisa and I have a really wonderful friendship that is started off in art and that commonality, but has grown to be much, much more than our common interest in being artists and makers. But we're both Midwestern girls, and we have a Midwestern aesthetic and way of being, and that comes across. We kind of laugh about that as well. It's difficult to explain exactly what that means to each of us. If she were sitting here, I'm sure we could figure that out. But it's we will often find that we're thinking about some of the same ideas when she's in Maine. She's like 16 hours from me. And so we don't see each other very often. We do try to talk at least once a month or so. But we're not in each other's environments that often that we're influencing on a daily basis. But what we find is that when we do get together and we start talking about our work, that there is a connection in the way that we think about it. There is a connection to materials. In fact, a lot of the paper that Lisa uses in her work, I make for her in my studio. But the way it manifests itself is very different. Lisa has her own voice. I have my own voice. But they're very compatible voices.
Mm.
She'll say, I'll say, well, I'm not sure what to do about this. And she'll throw some ideas out, or she'll say, she doesn't know what to do about this. And I'll throw some ideas out, but we're each interpreting them differently.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
So it's a nice collaboration.
Yeah. And it goes back to that theme that seems to keep coming up in our conversation, Jo, about friendship.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it wonderful to have a friend to bounce ideas off and, just there's no competition. I always believe that the tide rises all boats,
right.
In that sense. So, and having known and met Lisa online, I can see you guys just what a beautiful friendship, and what a great collaborator.
Yeah, we have a good time when we get to see each other.
Sure. Yeah, I bet. You've had many sort of creative spaces over the time, and a lot of artists might put some importance on having this grand studio to make great artwork. You've also just recently moved household, and you said to me earlier, it's easy to move my household, it's hell to move my studio.
Yes.
How has your different studio spaces impacted your art practice over the years?
Oh, gosh. I've had some wonderful studio spaces that I had a house and a studio that was built specifically for paper making. And then I moved from that space to another property where I had an old garage that had been used as a manufacturing for siding that I was able to convert to a paper studio. And I believe the picture that you have is from that studio space. And then when I moved to Columbia a couple of years ago, this is my old studio space, and it had floor drains and a room. You can see all the reed hanging in the doorway behind me, and there was another room that I had the beater in. And now I have a small basement studio for the paper making. And then above that, I have a dry space on the second floor where I do a lot of the dry work. And it, art, as an artist, you just figure out how to do it. You're not held back by, I don't have the right space. I don't have the right equipment. You figure out how to make do in a sense, but also how to create a system that is effective for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And it has taken me a while to figure out how to make this new space work. I've been here 2 years now, and I'm just now beginning to feel like it's working for me. I had to have some new tables made and rethink how I make my paper, but it's working. So that's all good. The one thing that is a little difficult is that I don't have this huge space with all these walls, blank walls around me that I can hang things on and look at to figure out where do I go next. I have a space upstairs and I have a space downstairs, and I have to move around to see that. So I'm finding that I'm using my phone a lot more to take pictures so that I can look at the work that way, and since I can't see it all in front of me at once.
Yeah, spending time with your work is so important. Yeah. Susan Clark, hi Susan, thanks for your question. She's asked, has your work changed as you move? Like, has it evolved with your...
That is part of why I wanted to go to Penland, because I wanted to explore some new ways of working. And right before I went to Penland, I did a series of two-dimensional collages that I had not done. I go back and forth and switch up how I work over time, because I'm constantly looking for new ways of thinking about the work, trying to incorporate some newer ideas into the work. And I will go back and revisit series. And so I have done collages in the past, but some of the three-dimensional pieces that you showed in the beginning of the talk, like the vessel series that with bright colors on them. And then there was a two-dimensional piece with bright colors. That series is what I kind of go back to that every time I'm thinking about what's coming next, because it's like a potter who does that pinch pot every day, or throws a pot on a wheel every day to become centered. The vessel making and collage are the way that I center myself and open up spaces for me to think about the next series. But then they become a series unto themselves. And it could be seen as a very bipolar way of working, because they're very opposite ideas. But for me, it's a way to pull everything together, to give myself the space to go off into a completely different direction for a little while and then come back. And so doing that collage series really helped center me in being in this studio and become comfortable with my new studio space. Going to Penland furthered that, because I started working on a new sculptural series. So that's how it's changing my work.
And I find it fascinating as well about the color shift. So, I would say that you're a very value-driven artist, and it's very textural, your work. And then when you need to recenter yourself, you just take this massive leap into color. Where does that influence come from?
I lived in Mexico for 5 years. Yes. And I was very influenced by the color palette, the artwork of the culture. And I think that has remained with me. I have a lot of Guatemalan and Mexican textiles that just hang in my house. And periodically it just has to come out in the work.
Yeah, you just have to let it out, and then you come back to I love that. I love that. We have a, excuse me, we have a masterclass going at the beginning of each year, and Donna Watson, as part of it, is teaching people to sort of find their essence of who they are. And a lot of it is trying to discover whether you're like a value artist or a color artist. And a lot of people find that quite challenging, and they're like, why can't I be both? So I just really love how you can just let that color artist come out every now and then. It's great.
Well, and I don't think of my collage work as being my strongest work necessarily. It's my fun work. It's where I play and just let it out and not worry about it. And but it really informs then what I consider to be my more serious work, I guess.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. Well, I love that we get a little insight into the playful side of Jo. And also that, that are they spinning tops as well? So it's also the these ones here, dancing the jitterbug. I mean, when I first saw this, I went, oh, I want to spin it. So that's very playful in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's from a series, where a vessel series that was about functional vessels that denied function.
Functional vessels that denied function. Yeah.
So that the vessel becomes a sculptural form that is no longer functional, but is still reminiscent of its original use. I guess it was the very first series that talked about tools in a sense, because I was thinking about utilitarian kitchen items and lidded vessels and bowls, and they became this kind of whimsical sculptural series for a show that I had probably, I don't know, 10 years ago now.
They're great. They're absolutely great. With thinking back to your studio space, and I want to show one of your very large pieces that you've created. Julie Ann has asked a question: has the restrictions affected the size of your pieces?
Not yet. I have an 8-foot by 5-foot piece on my studio wall right now that I'm trying to finish up from the Leaf series. Do you have Full Moon Rising?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So that one is actually 13 feet long. So the piece that I'm working on is not that long. I can put one piece up on my walls. I can't put 2 or 3 on my walls any longer like I could in my old studio. But I have a piece from this series that I'm trying to finish up now.
It's just beautiful. You can see in this image here the delicate leaves that you've made, and they're made out of paper, Jo? Are they actual leaves?
They're actual leaves that I process to turn into little pieces of paper. So in the paper making process, when you gather plant materials, they need to be cooked down in a caustic solution to remove all of the impurities and to soften them. And I experimented with that process with leaves, but rather than beating them to a pulp, I process them in a way so that the leaves remain in their original structure. And I've learned how to process them so that I can achieve a variety of colors. And then I dry them and often back them with cloth or paper, and I'm able to turn them into very, very strong elements that I've incorporated into a fairly substantial body of work at this point.
Yeah. Wow. How amazing. What an amazing technique that you've developed. Incredible. Yeah. Did you learn it off anyone else, or is it something you've solely developed yourself?
Well, there is a French process to create skeleton leaves. And so I started off by reading about that and was not able to achieve the skeletal leaves that I thought I was going to be creating, but found out that I could do all of these other things with the leaves that I think are actually more interesting anyway and have a lot more potential. So
I love that. Yeah. I love that when you go down a path and you think that you're expecting one outcome, but you actually learn so much more and it takes you on a whole new direction and you're like, yeah.
That's the best. It just, I love that. I think of the process itself as a dialogue, and I want the process to inform how the work evolves. And so when I start a piece, I have an idea of what I want, but it's the making of it that really informs it, and those serendipitous surprises that occur along the way are the best.
Yeah, I think everyone watching will agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jo, we're almost coming to the end, and I just wanted to ask if you had any advice to people who were interested in making their own paper, but they were kind of worried about maybe all the tools and things they need to have. What's kind of like the minimum requirements that you need for someone to start making their own paper, and what advice would you give them to start incorporating this into their own art practice?
Sure. Gosh, we could do a whole class just on that.
Sorry.
I started with a kitchen blender, and recycled paper, and just soak the paper down. And I would just put water in the blender and a little bit of the torn sheets of paper, and the secret is that you have to stop the blender as soon as it sounds like it's working hard, because if you don't, you're going to burn out the motor. And you just keep repeating that process until you have enough pulp made. And then you can take just a small, like a canvas stretchers, and stretch screen over it. And you can just dip that into a vat with the pulp and the water in it, and you have a sheet of paper. And then you just press that or couch it onto an old sheet, or a piece of wool cloth, and that's enough to make paper. And you can then cover it with a roll, and take a rolling pin and press more water out of it, and then just slap it up on a window, and you have paper in a very rudimentary form. So that would be the simplest way to do it, but you can become much more complex with it as well, depending on what your intentions are and how interested you are in it.
Yeah. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating getting to know you and your work better. I feel like I found a new friend in you and your artwork. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I've made a new friend too, and I hope to stay in touch.
Absolutely. And you said once, I knew I wanted to pursue art since I was 10 years old. I just did not know how that would happen until you were in college.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on your career and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself? And at what stage in your career did you need it the most?
I think I would give myself the same advice that I give my students. Be fearless. Don't be afraid to pursue what you're passionate about, whatever that passion is. It's not going to be the easiest path, but it's your path with the right heart. And don't be afraid to ask people questions along the way of, how do I do this? What do you think about this? You get to curate your own life, but you're only going to live that life fully if you approach it without fear.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jo.
Yeah.
That was perfect. And what a beautiful way to end our hour together. It was just been such a pleasure. I hope we can keep in contact.
I hope so.
And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. It's just, and enjoy, and I want to say in inverted commas, enjoy your retirement.
I graduated from college finally.
You finally did after 37 years. Congratulations. And thank you everyone for watching. Please put a note of gratitude for Jo, and we'll play that during the slideshow exit. So thanks, Jo. Hold on the line and I'll say a private goodbye after this.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening.
Thanks, everyone.